August 14, 2011. Kelowna, British Columbia. Morning heat already bouncing off the asphalt. The air cracked before anyone screamed. 45 shell casings hit the pavement. 34 tore through the white Porsche before the echoes stopped. Witnesses ducked for cover. Some never looked back. Then the smoke just hung there, too still for what had just happened. Police later found no muzzle flash on nearby cameras. No casings. No retreat path. Just a silence that didn't belong in daylight. Jonathan Bacon, eldest of 3 brothers who built connections no one could trace. He wasn't made for violence. He just learned to live inside it. And now daylight was cashing every debt they'd ever collected. He'd made peace with dying, just not with dying there. Maybe that's how power always ends, not in fury, but in perfect aim. Abbotsford was where the fuse was lit. Cold, factual, unforgiving. Miss the button? Go ahead. Subscribe now so you don't forget later. Abbotsford, a city that sold safety like an image. Farmland, church bells, clean streets. But some houses hold futures the brochures never mention. Inside one of them, David and Susan Bacon. He taught special needs students. She managed properties for Prospera Credit Union. Ordinary jobs, ordinary hours. But ordinary doesn't always last. Jonathan Bacon, born January 31st, 1981. Jared Bacon, March 14th, 1983. Jamie Bacon, August 1st, 1985. 3 brothers, 1 small city, and a pattern that would rewrite how British Columbia understood ambition. Jonathan, confident, social, the one who never looked nervous when police drove by. Jared, loud, impulsive, always testing limits. Jamie, athletic, disciplined, reportedly a provincial-level wrestler who learned control before he learned restraint. Neighbors describe them as polite. Teachers describe them as promising. But confidence has a shadow. Arrogance. And arrogance, when fed by comfort, grows into appetite. By the late 1990s, Jonathan was driving a BMW to W.J. Mowat Secondary, the kind of car that made teachers pause mid-sentence. The brothers drifted into older circles, gyms, nightclubs, men with thicker wallets and shorter patience. That's where curiosity turned into invitation. They weren't joining a crew. They were being evaluated. The city's nights smelled of exhaust and cheap cologne, currency for young ambition. Scent outlasted the engines. 2000, Jonathan charged with possession of a controlled substance. 2001, charged with possession of stolen property. 2005, Jared, charged with attempted murder after a shooting outside the Fraser Valley Inn. Witnesses recanted, and the case collapsed. Each arrest ended the same way. Paperwork without consequence. And every escape reinforced the same illusion: immunity. Investigators believe that around this period, the brothers crossed paths with Clay Ruesch, founder of the United Nations Gang, a multicultural network formed in 1997 and later tied to international cocaine importation through Vancouver's ports. Members carried 3 Chinese characters inked into their skin: honor, loyalty, respect. To suburban sons, it looked less like warning and more like philosophy. Police summaries later described the Bacons as unusually comfortable around organized crime figures. They weren't soldiers, they were students, learning hierarchy, learning leverage. And the lesson was simple: control buys safety longer than decency ever could. By their 20s, detectives traced them to mid-level distribution networks, nightclubs, gyms, car dealerships. No gunfire yet. No blood, just money, fast, clean, and quiet. But money has gravity, and gravity doesn't negotiate. So what pulls 3 brothers from a stable home into a war they never needed to fight? Was it greed or the thrill of being feared? If privilege can't keep you off the street, what does that say about power? And when your last name becomes a brand, do you step back or double down? Whatever the answer, Abbotsford's silence was already cracking. The next chapter wouldn't start with words. It would start with gunfire. He wasn't supposed to live through that morning. September 21st, 2006, Abbotsford. 5 bullets tore into Jonathan Bacon. 2 shattered the windshield. 1 grazed his skull. Another pierced his lung. He survived. According to investigators, that survival shifted British Columbia's underworld more than any conviction ever could. At the time, the Bacons were still loosely associated with the United Nations gang. Clay Ruache's multicultural network, built on honor, loyalty, respect. But when you survive a hit, you start counting who didn't call afterward, and who might have known it was coming. Detectives believe that recovery marked a split, the brothers beginning to align with a newer, faster-rising outfit, the Red Scorpions, founded by Eddie Narong and brothers Corey and Michael Lal. To outsiders, it looked like ambition. To insiders, it looked like treason. The roots of that betrayal trace further back. 2005, when Jonathan was arrested in connection with a home invasion. Police described one suspect as wearing a stolen RCMP vest. Charges were laid, then stayed after witness non-cooperation. Case closed, but not forgotten. That file became part of the pattern, privilege meeting impersonation of power. From that point, Abbotsford's quiet was gone. By late 2006, British Columbia's underworld had divided cleanly. The UN gang on one side, the Red Scorpions and their allies on the other. The transition wasn't gradual. It was surgical. Territories redrawn, debts recalculated, loyalties rewritten at gunpoint. Between late 2006 and 2007, gunfire became punctuation. Surrey, Langley, Abbotsford. RCMP strike force logs recorded shots fired as often as traffic stops. Each week another message, or another mistake. In 2007, police found a hidden compartment in a vehicle linked to Jamie Bacon, containing 4 loaded handguns. The compartment, described by investigators as the work of a specialist, was designed to conceal weapons during transport. Ballistics linked none to ongoing cases, but Jared Bacon's fingerprints were lifted from the grips. Charges followed, but none held. Each release reinforced a dangerous habit, immunity as lifestyle. The Hells Angels, never distant from profit, were quietly supplying both sides, product, weapons, introductions. According to internal CFSE UBC briefs, it was an open contest for market share. The Lower Mainland had become a marketplace written in calibers. And then came October 19, 2007, Balmoral Tower, Surrey. Concrete halls, grey light, Unit 1505. Inside, Corey Lal, Michael Lal, Ryan Bartolomeo, Eddie Narong, and 2 men who had nothing to do with the war. A knock at the door. 3 gunmen entered, Cody Haviser, Matthew Johnston, and a third later identified in court only as Person X. Their target was Corey Lal, accused of dealing without authorization. 19 rounds, 6 bodies, 2 innocents. Ed Schellenberg, an appliance repairman, and Chris Mohan, a neighbor who answered the wrong knock. The province called it the Surrey 6 murders, the worst gang-related mass killing in British Columbia's history. It ended whatever illusion remained that this was still a feud. Now it was infrastructure. Detective Derek Brassington of the RCMP's Integrated Homicide Investigation Team, IHIT, led the inquiry. He called the scene controlled chaos, bullet paths precise, victims positioned. Forensics traced the casings to restricted handguns seized months later from a Red Scorpion cache in Coquitlam. But hierarchy blurred fast. Who ordered it? Who approved 6 murders, 2 of them innocent, to make a statement? Every witness vanished behind publication bans. Every phone went dark. The Bacons disappeared from routine surveillance. Phone records show gaps, calls ending mid-conversation, devices powered down for days. Jonathan switched vehicles twice that week. Jamie abandoned his residence. For the first time, investigators wrote a single word across every log: underground. Convictions would come 7 years later, Havisher and Johnston each receiving 6 counts of first-degree murder and 1 of conspiracy. But by then, the landscape had already changed. The UN gang called it a declaration. The Red Scorpions called it business. Psychologically, escalation followed an old rule. Fear breeds preemption. Once everyone expects betrayal, violence becomes maintenance. And when killing starts to feel like organization, the system has already collapsed. So what happens when loyalty turns mathematical? When survival is just subtraction? Who profits when a city's silence becomes its only defense? The answers never came. Only more bodies. And a province learning it wasn't the same place it had been a year before. A black Porsche Cayenne rolls to a stop at a light on Kingsway. Inside sits Jonathan Barber, 23 years old, an audio installer, driving the vehicle for a client. That client, Jonathan Bacon. Two cars approach, windows lower, 20 rounds tear through the metal. Barber dies instantly. His girlfriend Vicky King is struck by shrapnel. She survives. According to investigators, the shooters believed Bacon was behind the wheel. It was a mistaken identity hit, but no mistake about intent. That single misfire turned a feud into a vendetta. The RCMP, Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit, CFSEU-BC, called it a targeted hit gone tragically wrong. For the public, it was the first civilian casualty tied directly to the Lower Mainland gang war. Overnight, headlines shifted from curiosity to crisis. 3 weeks later, May 19, 2008, UN gang founder Clay Ruich was arrested in Texas after his charter flight from Mexico was flagged by U.S. border agents. Court filings later revealed encrypted messages interpreted by investigators as authorization for retaliation against the Bacon group. The wording was redacted, but the intent was clear. The war had an agenda. By late 2008, drive-by shootings became routine across Surrey, Burnaby, and Abbotsford. Police data recorded over 100 gang-related shootings that year, one every 3 days. Each scene carried the same rhythm: tinted vehicles, short bursts, clean exits. And with every round, the boundaries between survival and routine blurred. Through 2008 and 2009, the conflict deepened. RCMP intercepts documented alleged UN plans to detonate explosives near Bacon properties, including one suspected vehicle bomb and another possible rocket-propelled grenade attack. Both operations were dismantled before launch. The Bacons, in turn, allegedly sanctioned counter-hits through Red Scorpion shooters. Hits aimed at UN affiliates in Coquitlam, Burnaby, and New Westminster. Police referred to it as escalation without logic. Each act erased a rival, but added nothing to control. Each arrest paused violence for a moment, never for long. Then came Project E-Pandora, an RCMP surveillance initiative launched in early 2010. Analysts began tracking repeated meetings between Jonathan Bacon, Larry Amaro of the Hells Angels, White Rock chapter, and James Riak, an independent enforcer. According to internal memos, the pattern was consistent with coalition-building activity. Within months, that alliance had a name: the Wolfpack. Riak brought manpower. Amaro brought logistics and transport. Jonathan Bacon brought capital, access, and a reputation, both an asset and a curse. Later that year, Randy Naker, leader of the Independent Soldiers, joined the table. Together, they linked the West Coast smuggling networks to new suppliers in Mexico. Federal intelligence under Operation Polar Bear noted possible coordination with intermediaries linked to the Sinaloa cartel. In practice, that meant infrastructure, not rumor. Product in, profit out. But in crime, structure doesn't create stability. It just makes the collapse neater. By late 2010, the Wolfpack's expansion had drawn a new enemy: the Doc Duray Group, led by brothers Gourmet, Sandeep, and Souk Doc, aligned with remnants of the UN gang. They saw the Wolfpack as consolidation, one network monopolizing too much. Police called it a refragmentation of Lower Mainland markets. Everyone else called it another war forming. October 16, 2010, Metrotown, Burnaby. At 3:24 p.m., Gourmet Doc is shot dead in his SUV in the Metrotown parking lot. Broad daylight, dozens of witnesses. No one speaks. That moment became ignition. Overnight, British Columbia's quiet middle-class districts turned into coded territories again. Amaro moved between safe houses. Bacon switched vehicles weekly. Wiretaps later showed encrypted messages filled with mistrust and fatigue, a network aware success had made them targets. Still, expansion continued. By early 2011, Wolfpack activity had reached Toronto and Calgary, funneling cash through offshore accounts. One CFS EU analyst described them as a hybrid. Part outlaw culture, part corporate discipline. Every cartel has an accountant. Every gang has an ambition. This was business, not revenge. But business has gravity, and gravity never negotiates. By mid-2011, the Dr. Ray Alliance was plotting counter-moves. Wiretap summaries captured references to Kelowna, Beach Weekend, and high-value target. Detectives later flagged those words as the earliest sign of an ambush. Jonathan Bacon ignored the warnings. He told friends he was untouchable. Investigators logged the same phrase in their files, perceived invulnerability. August 14, 2011 would test that belief. A Porsche, a hotel parking lot, and 7 years of alliances about to converge in daylight. So who writes the ending in a business built on betrayal? And when the ledger finally balances, does anyone survive the math? August 14, 2011, Kelowna, British Columbia. Sunlight on the lake. Music from balconies, the kind of afternoon that makes violence feel improbable. In the parking lot of the Delta Grand Hotel, a white Porsche Cayenne idled under the glare. Inside sat Jonathan Bacon, Larry Amaro, James Rioch, and 2 women, Leah Haddon-Watts, 21, and Lindsay Black, 19. It was supposed to be a weekend escape. No meetings, no business, just calm. According to investigators, calm ended the moment they started the engine. A GPS tracker had been planted beneath the Porsche days earlier, pinging their route from Vancouver to Kelowna. Who installed it remains disputed. iHit later confirmed the device existed but never named the hand that placed it. At 2:41 p.m., witnesses heard what they first thought were fireworks. Then came the bursts, short, controlled, deliberate. 2 vehicles boxed the Porsche in. Gunmen stepped out, Jason McBride, Jakin Mendeharan, and Michael Jones, rifles raised. 45 shell casings later, 34 rounds had torn through the SUV. Jonathan Bacon was hit 6 times, chest, shoulder, neck. He died before paramedics arrived. Amaro was struck in the face and shoulder but lived. Rioch ran for cover and escaped. Both women were critically injured. Haddon-Watts was left paralyzed. Forensic teams later collected 7.62mm shell casings, consistent with AK-47-style rifles, fired from at least 2 weapons. No muzzle flash caught on nearby cameras. No retreat path recovered. Just silence, smoke, and the smell of spent metal. RCMP sealed the scene under iHit command within minutes. Dozens of officers marked evidence beside beach chairs and luggage carts. A resort turned into a battlefield. The Ford Explorer used in the hit was found burning near Winfield, 15 kilometers north, its VINs ground off. Detectives quickly linked the ambush to the Dr. group, rivals aligned with the UN gang and seeking retaliation for Gurmit Doc's 2010 murder. But there were whispers of something closer. That information from inside the Wolfpack leaked the trip's itinerary. No single version ever settled. Psychologically, it broke the illusion of structure. If Jonathan Bacon could be reached in daylight, surrounded by allies, then the entire hierarchy was paper-thin. Fears shifted upward, from soldiers to strategists. Investigators described the scene as surgical. No missed shots, no stray rounds, planning over passion, and that precision said more than any confession. In the aftermath, the Wolfpack unraveled. Larry Amaro, airlifted under police guard, spent months recovering. James Rioch vanished overseas. Randy Naker, furious, began searching for the leak, calling meetings no one wanted to attend. But when a crew's foundation is paranoia, every silence sounds like guilt. Within a year, Naker would be dead too, Another name in a cycle that no one could stop counting, because when bullets speak, alliances end, and in the underworld, endings always sound the same. When Jonathan Bacon hit the pavement in Kelowna, the silence didn't last. It shifted, from shock to momentum. Every bullet fired that day rewired British Columbia's criminal landscape. Within weeks, retaliation moved through the province like a current through copper, invisible, fast, and merciless. Each hit carried its own arithmetic. One death avenged, another debt created. September 2011, Vancouver. William Billy Wu, a longtime associate linked to Wolfpack Logistics, was found dead near his East Vancouver home. Investigators classified it as a targeted shooting, no arrests. The method, close range, 2 rounds to the chest, fit the Dury signature. October 2011, Surrey. Stephen Leone, a courier long watched by the Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit, CFSEU, was executed in an underground parking lot near 100 Avenue and King George Highway. No witnesses, no shell casings, no hesitation. RCMP reports called it professional in precision, intentional in outcome. January 17, 2012, Vancouver. Inside the Sheraton Wall Center's Bar 1 restaurant, Sandeep Dipdur sat waiting to meet someone. His bodyguard had stepped outside for a smoke. A moment no one thought would matter. A man in an orange construction jacket walked in, calm, deliberate, and aimed without hesitation. Multiple shots. Dur died where he sat before his bodyguard could return. The shooter walked out through the lobby and vanished into downtown traffic. A public hit, clean, clinical, and devastating. Vancouver's calm didn't break that night. It shattered. January 2012, Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Weeks after his Langley home was firebombed, Tom Gizzi, a Wolfpack-linked associate, was discovered shot to death along a roadside. Mexican authorities confirmed multiple gunshot wounds. Canadian investigators quietly listed it as gang-related, cross-border in nature. Retaliation outsourced. June 25, 2012, Port Moody, British Columbia. Randy Naker, co-founder of the Independent Soldiers and Wolfpack partner, stood outside a Starbucks on Barnett Highway. A single shooter approached, fired once, and walked away. Naker died where he stood, coffee still in hand. Witnesses later told police the shooter never broke pace. November 26, 2012, Burnaby. Suk Doc, the last surviving Doc brother, and his bodyguard Thomas Mantell were gunned down outside the Executive Hotel at Metrotown. Both died instantly. Investigators linked the shooting to Wolfpack affiliates, though no one was ever charged. It was the final act in a chain of reprisals stretching 15 months. By the end of 2012, the Lower Mainland map looked less like territory and more like an obituary. Each neighborhood carried a memory. Surrey, Abbotsford, Burnaby, all echoes of a war no one could end. Between 2011 and 2013, more than 20 targeted killings were tied to the post-Kelowna fallout. The RCMP called it the Hydra effect. Cut off one head, 2 appear. Every victory produced another vacancy. Every death opened a seat no one wanted to fill. CFSEU analysts tried to find order in the chaos, linking timelines, tracing phones, mapping retaliations. But every connection pointed in a circle. No hierarchy, just hunger. The law was catching up, but barely. Jamie Bacon, already in custody since 2009, became the legal face of the war, charged in connection with the Surrey 6 murders. He spent years in solitary confinement as the case unraveled under its own weight. At the center of the collapse stood RCMP Detective Derek Brassington, once the lead investigator, later accused of misconduct after an inappropriate relationship with a protected witness known as Jane Doe 1. The revelations shattered evidentiary integrity and derailed years of prosecution. Public trust fractured alongside the case. By 2020, after over a decade of hearings, Jamie Bacon accepted a plea deal, guilty to conspiracy to commit murder in the Surrey 6 plot. Sentence, 18 years, later reduced to 5 years and 7 months with credit for time served. Projected release, 2026. The ruling satisfied no one, not the families, not the investigators, not the city that had watched 17 years of blood for so little resolution. Jared Bacon followed a quieter path. Convicted in 2012 for conspiracy to traffic cocaine, sentenced to 12 years, later reduced to 7, paroled 2017, revoked 2018, re-released 2020. Every parole board report read the same. Limited insight into risk factors, moderate reintegration potential. By 2013, the cycle had slowed, not from peace, but exhaustion. The power vacuum had filled itself with ghosts. Each shot fired between 2006 and 2012 had rearranged the same equation: control, fear, profit, repeat. So what was left? A province haunted by familiar names and unfinished paperwork. A system that confused volume for justice. And an underworld learning that hierarchy means little when every man with a gun can rewrite the rules. Was it revenge? Or just entropy, the system consuming itself? When loyalty becomes arithmetic, who's left to keep count? Time buries stories. But the Bacon name never stayed buried. It lingers, like the echo of a casing that never stopped spinning. Jamie Bacon sits at the center of that echo, arrested in 2009, held in solitary for years, 23 hours a day, alone with the sound of his own pacing. By the time his trial began, the case had already begun collapsing. A detective's affair with a witness tore through the integrity of the evidence, and the justice system that promised order turned on itself. In 2020, JD accepted a plea. 18 years reduced to just over 5, with credit for time served. His projected release, 2026. The paperwork called it closure. The public called it compromise. Jared Bacon followed the same rhythm. Convicted in 2012, released in 2017, revoked in 2018, freed again in 2020. Every parole board report read the same: limited insight into risk, institutional language for a man who learned adaptation better than remorse. And Jonathan Bacon, Kelowna, August 14, 2011, will never leave the asphalt that recorded his last breath. 6 bullets, 34 holes in metal. One name turned into a cautionary myth. 13 years, 3 brothers. One province that learned ambition isn't inherited, it's weaponized. They weren't born into chaos, they built it. They engineered it with connections that ran deeper than family and colder than loyalty. And for a while, it worked, until gravity caught up. From Abbotsford's cul-de-sacs to Kelowna's lakefront, the Bacon brothers redefined what power looked like in Canada's underworld. They blurred the lines between organized crime and organized ambition, between businessmen and gunmen. Every deal felt legitimate until the first gun jammed. Every alliance looked loyal until the first profit margin split. For 2 decades, their names rewired an entire province. Deals disguised as friendships. Alliances disguised as peace. Violence disguised as order. Every contract had an expiry date. They just didn't expect to read theirs first. By 2026, Jamie Bacon will walk free, 17 years after his arrest. Jared already has. Jonathan never will. Yet the network they built still breathes in fragments, smaller, quieter, digital now. Proof that the economy of violence doesn't collapse, it adapts. It finds new brokers, new faces, new names to carry the same currency. Law enforcement calls it the Lower Mainland conflict, but words can't soften history. For every statistic, there's a mother who learned to sleep through gunfire. A city that built new neighborhoods over old crime scenes, and a generation that mistook fear for normalcy. If there's a lesson buried beneath the noise, it's not about justice, it's about gravity. Everything built on imbalance eventually falls. Men, empires, even myths. In British Columbia's shadows, one wrong move isn't a mistake, it's a sentence. You're still here? Do what you meant to do earlier, subscribe. And if you made it this far, you know what to do. Hit the bell. There are more cases like this coming, cases where the truth is darker than any fiction. See you in the next one.